I'm Dr. Kati Kasiani. I'm the Partnerships Manager at HEVA Fund. For the Ignite Culture Fund, I'm also the Internal Program Lead.
My name is Wakiru Njuguna and I am a Partner and Investment Manager at HEVA. So my work is basically around the investments we make towards the businesses that we support, as well as fundraising and coming up with a strategy for investment for the fund. HEVA was essentially put together to be able to figure out sustainable livelihoods for artists. We were very interested in trying to see whether artists could just focus on their creation process and, put together businesses around that, so they could be able to earn money and make profit. And so our philosophy is, in a sense, is to be able to build high-level, high-value, quality businesses that are profitable, and ensure that the creative economy is a place that has, happy entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, as well as competitive businesses that are able to compete not only in the region, but then also internationally.
The Ignite Culture Fund is the ACP EU Culture Program for Eastern Africa. The European Union and the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States put together this fund that is focusing on improving conditions for creative and cultural practitioners around the world. And they have multiple clusters, and we are the Eastern Africa cluster, focusing on 14 countries. There's a cluster in Western, Central and Southern Africa, as well as a Caribbean and a Pacific cluster. Our East African cluster is going to deploy 4.5 billion euro into work by creative and cultural practitioners in the 14 countries, looking to improve production, both quality and quantity, focus on improving skills for industry readiness, as well as improving the business environment by supporting policy and business financing research, and finally also increase the visibility of creative and cultural practitioners and their work to audiences and people who can commercialize for them. The Ignite Culture Fund is unique in several ways. We are deploying, utilizing local partners. Another thing is that it's a fund that's entirely and completely for creative and cultural industries. We were also lucky that the implementing partners were able to design the rollout, and so we were able to include in eligibility for a really wide variety of creative and cultural practice. So you're thinking about design, you're thinking about visual arts, you're thinking about cultural practice, archiving, we're also thinking about emerging media, new technology. So there's a very wide umbrella for people to check in. That's one. Another thing is that we are working with creative and cultural industries to formalize. So we work to kind of increase the connection and the interaction of creative and cultural practitioners with formal institutions, like via registration, making sure that you have your finances in order, etc. The fund not only allows the recipients to boost their businesses, but also improve their internal capacity. So there's a focus on making sure that through this grant you're also able to increase the capacity of your staff, both in number and in skill. As well, we've developed a system that is supportive to partnerships, which we think are very useful for creative and cultural practitioners who tend to be in smaller organizations and silos, and so this is allowing for a lot of kind of cross-pollination, which we're finding very interesting. It's also unique in that it is grant funding, which we know tends to go to a lot of let's say non-commercial entities, and we've been able to structure it such that even if your primary focus is making something and selling it, or providing a service and selling it, you still have an opportunity to access this fund and utilize it in that way, even if you may not have sort of an NGO type of approach to your work. We wanted to have a big tent, so there's a wide variety of opportunities for different types of registered organizations. If you're a sole proprietor, but you can show us your registration and you can show us your history of work, you are eligible. You don't have to have an existing company with multiple staff. If you are a non-profit, a trust, a charity, you do philanthropic work, you're eligible. If you are a commercial entity, a company, you are still eligible. Any profits that are made through the work have to be kind of channeled back into the organization in that sense. So you can't kind of pocket any profits, but they still go back into the company and allow you to build. So by doing this, we were able to make sure that the people that I've mentioned who have a very commercial approach but are still doing work in the creative and cultural sector are still able to get this funding. And that's important because grant funding is patient capital. They don't have to kind of focus so much on making a profit to pay it back. So you get this funding, you're able to utilize it in the time period that your contract states, and what is given in return is mostly information. So we get to learn a bit more about the kind of work you're doing, as well as the challenges you're facing in the business environment. And then between ourselves and our partners and our funders, we then have information that can be used to make the situation better. Our 2021 call was successful for 19 partners from 8 countries. And it's a wide variety. So again, we have the funding is tiered. So we offer 3 tiers of funding. The smallest tier is a fixed amount of €30,000. Then there's a second tier that goes from 31 to 90, and a third tier from 90 to 180. So the size of the companies kind of falls into those tranches. So you have smaller companies, you have more established companies, and you also have partnerships. I should also mention that the partnerships are also unique in the sense that you don't have to only partner within the 14 countries. As long as one partner is from one of the 14 countries, you can partner with any other African country, any country in the EU, as well as the United Kingdom. And this has allowed us to get a really rich cohort. We have a cohort that is representative of visual art, animation. We have a consortium working in Kenya and in the EU that's going to do a project around augmented reality. We have a couple of projects in the Sudan which are very integrated in their cultural heritage. One will be working on preserving and bringing forth perfume making techniques that have been kind of lost but are still maintained in the older generation. We're also very excited about the kind of intergenerational learning, making sure that older people are still feeling useful in the society, but also passing on skills to younger people. We also, in Sudan, there's also an organization that's going to be working with palm to do basket weaving, but also with a commercial endpoint. In Kenya, we have music performance. We have a really interesting project around libraries, which involves both public programming as well as some kind of archiving. We have a group of stand-up comedians. So we are open to all kinds of ideas. We're open to things we haven't heard of before, and we're open to these partnerships that allow maybe a smaller organization to access knowledge, skills exchange as well from more established organizations or from other countries. So of course they met the minimum criteria as defined in the eligibility, and this I think where a lot of people kind of struggle is initially the registration, beginning the steps of formalization or partnering with an organization that it already is. So that was one thing. 2 is that they have some kind of footprint in the sector. They have a demonstrable track record of this is what we've been doing specifically in the creative and cultural industries, because we do see a couple of people who are like, hey, there's this grant, I'm usually a farmer, but I could come do it. So you have to kind of show a demonstrable track record. We have an audience and we've been having this kind of impact. Beyond that, there was a lot of innovation. So I think one of the other benefits of grant financing is it allows you to take risks. Try something new. So people were not only presenting this is what we do Monday to Friday and want to keep doing it, we've been thinking of trying something new, trying an adjustment, entering a new market. So that kind of innovation was interesting. Also we have a big focus on inclusion. So we're interested in organizations that have already been thinking about, is my team diverse? Is my output diverse? Am I thinking about all kinds of members of the community being able to access it in different places? Or is this grant the opportunity that I'm going to utilize to do that work? So that, as well as digital innovation. So not necessarily just a website or an app. Is there something interesting you're thinking of doing that will further inclusion, that will further visibility, that will allow your audience to reach you more simply and tell other people about your story? I think those were kind of the standouts.
So one of the things that this facility is offering is also support. So support for the organizations, internal support to be able to streamline their processes and build their capacity, not only for staff, but then also the structural businesses and organizations. So we hope that these organizations are going to leverage having the experience of Ignite to be able to fundraise for more funds in future, because we're seeing one of the things that is talked about is about formalization and the ability for local organizations to be able to compete for those major grants. So we really want to be able to build their capacity so they can be able to get more grants in future and continue their work. The other thing that we're really interested in terms of like what we see happening is just building organic relationships and networks between the organizations that are working, that have gotten the facility under Ignite, because we feel that there is such innovation from the different partners, but then when they come together, there's such magic that can happen. So we want to see that magic in the next, by 2024 or even after. We're already seeing such interesting points of interaction between the organizations and such, like there's already organic formation of relationships. So we really want to see what that will look like in future. It's being able to build the capacity of these organizations to continue the work that they're already doing and to expand their work. So Ignite offers an opportunity for organizations to meet and interact with other organizations from 14 Eastern African countries. And it's not every day you find such opportunities. So like I said, we really want to see what that will look like and what kind of partnerships will form, whether it's projects that are across the region or organizations trying to figure out how they can solve certain gaps and solutions, and even learning from each other, because there are certain things that exist in certain parts of in certain countries that don't exist in others. So like policy issues and how people have been able to contribute to some policy reviews in certain countries. Those could be learning points for countries that don't necessarily have structural and policy guidelines for the cultural and creative industries. The other thing around impact is infrastructure. And infrastructure for us is very important because we feel like one of the gaps in this sector is the access to infrastructure, especially for entrepreneurs and practitioners. And so we want to see what having, let's say a space in Ethiopia could do to, for artists, not just in Ethiopia, but artists across the region. Like, are they able to access? And again, like we talked about the free trade area. It's, are these people able to move across the different countries and access the infrastructure that will be as a result of this project? There's also the understanding of each other's cultures, because we kind of sit in a space where sometimes something could be happening in another country, or they could have specific cultural differences that we're not aware about, but through Ignite we are able to fund and advance money towards the creation of cultural goods and services that are going to be, I guess, publicized and across the Eastern African region. So there's that opportunity of culture, the movement of culture, and the understanding of each other cultures across the region and the wider continent, because I don't know if my colleague mentioned that Ignite is part of a wider facility that looks at the continent as 6 blocks. So there's that also. There's also the building of these organizations. So we find that in this space, there's not a lot of funding that goes towards organizations. And we've broken down our funding, not just for the bigger organizations, but even for the small ones, the entry-level ones in a sense. And so we want to see these organizations grow as a result of the funding, both on their balance sheet and income statements, and they're able to use that and leverage it for future growth. So the first thing is access to markets. Previously, accessing markets has been one of the hindrances for the growth of businesses in this sector. And that looks like many things. Does the organization have the access to information about certain opportunities? Does the organization have access to platforms or even money to be able to go for shows? Does the organization have access to whether it's the platforms if it's a digital organization, do they have access to those platforms? So for us, one of the things that we're doing is we're very interested in creating partnerships with international partners so that our entrepreneurs can be able to access and plug into these opportunities and can be aware that the opportunities are actually there. We're also interested in creating sort of like a knowledge center in a sense where we share information and we are able to communicate about specific opportunities that exist. And aside from that, it's also financially supporting these organizations. So we've previously done several partnerships with organizations that either create market opportunities or market shows and such, because we feel that other than investing in the business, you cannot have a successful business if this business doesn't know where to sell, and if its customer base is limited to just one place or one country. There's so much opportunity out there within the region and even outside of this continent. So we are able to support, or we are interested in supporting these entrepreneurs to be able to access those markets, either by forming partnerships or supporting them, whether it's like paying for a ticket and such things. The other thing is about competitiveness, because you find that like now the world is one village. So if you're going to compete on a global perspective, your goods need to be at par with international goods and international companies. And so we're very interested in supporting entrepreneurs to innovate internally, and then also expand or experiment on certain things that they feel need a bit of tweaking within their production base. The third thing is also supporting these organizations. Like once the businesses go for these international shows, they will come back with orders. So who's going to support those orders? Because banks will ask so many questions. So what HEVA has done is that we've also created financial instrument or product that supports entrepreneurs who are in such circumstances. So if you have an LPO from whoever your client, and it needs a lot of capital, we are able to finance up to 80% of that, so that you can be able to produce and have your goods shipped within the appropriate time. So some of the things that we're looking at. The other thing, or the last thing that I wanted to say, is also contribution to not just knowledge, which is in form of research, but then also using this to inform policy. And we've done that before, because for a business to be competitive, the price also is a factor. And the price needs to be competitive. And so if we're able to influence policy around taxation for creative goods and services, then we feel that that is also one of the ways that we're able to build these businesses in a way that they're able to compete internationally.